let people come into the studio. It's going to take about a minute or two. You can see comments. You should on the right side of the screen. You'll see something that says comments and reactions. If you want to see the comments,
Oh, right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they'll come in. They'll come in from all the different platforms.
Okay.
Now wait a minute. Let's see, Roger. Get Roger's name there, and Adams. All right. All right. We got 8 people.
Nice.
There must be something big happening because my soul told me to start juicing and drinking water. Must be getting ready for something. All of us. Shout out to Marina Govier. She's in the audience. She's done some great work for us, all of us. Let's see what we got. 11 people. Let's wait. Let's wait another 20 seconds. Okay, so let's roll it out. This is the premiere episode of From Light. I'm sorry, From Darkness to Light, an exploration of spiritual artists and addicts. I love the title. Everybody that's coming out with these shows, it's very original. Everything's original. I've totally surpassed my expectations on what people are doing. So, and I know Adam because we've done some shows together and we've been in some
Yep.
sessions together. So I'm excited to see what you got in mind to host this program every week. I know it's going to be deep because I know you. But yeah, you want to just let us know what's going to happen and who your buddy is here from Philly.
Yes.
and
Yes. So, I mean, I'm just kind of starting with what I felt called to do, and we'll see where it goes, what happens, where it goes from there. But the idea is essentially to talk to people, artists, addicts, people who have been through trauma and really kind of transmuted it and transformed it in their lives and come out the other side. I want to just kind of get into like where they came from, what they went through, how like the darkness has been a part of their experience, and how they've either healed themselves or are healing themselves through connecting to their true nature, spirituality, etc. I'm definitely very interested in talking to addicts because that is where I have come from. My definition of addict is basically anyone, because I feel we all have addictions in various ways. Like, being a heroin addict might be a little more hardcore, of course, but whether it's sex, relationships, love, people pleasing, food, it's just part of the human experience. And that's a big part of kind of what I want to do, is taking the stigma out of trauma and addiction. And because ultimately that just comes from separation. And the more we see trauma and addiction as like this sort of stigmatized negative thing, the more it keeps people in that space. And the way to heal it is to understand that we're all in it together in various ways. And then also talking to creatives, because that's a big part of my history and path and passion, and just to see like their journey into kind of using art to elevate consciousness, and their creative process, what they go through, how they integrate the dark and light aspects of themselves, um, their kind of visions for art as the planet raises in frequency, because so much of it has been, a lot of it has been trauma based, and that's great. But I think we're trying to find a new paradigm where we still integrate like the darker aspects of ourselves, because it's part of the human experience, but in a more healing and beneficial and universally benevolent way on some level. So that's just kind of the loose leaf kind of form for where I want to start. And I don't know what will come of it or where it will go, or if at some point we can have performances and artistic expression on the show. It's just, I have no idea, but it'll take on a life of its own if it does, if it's meant to. And that's where I wanted to start. So
Far out. Now, I
yeah,
think that's a great start. And I think the fact that, so because at Sology, we've never had the production uh, that a lot of people put into podcasts and other video productions. A lot of it's live and impromptu and spontaneous, and I
yeah,
really feel like that's something that's starting to show itself in our lives as the earth goes through this transformation and people go through transformation. That you don't put a cap on it, you don't put like boundaries on it. You just say this is where we're starting, and who the fuck
right.
knows what it's going to look like down the road. So
Yeah,
yeah, and then you got your buddy here, Roger the Knucklehead. Was that right in the promo? Was that a
yeah.
name that
I'll let
you're?
Roger answer, but yeah.
Yeah. So what's up with that? Yeah.
Um, hey everybody. I'm stoked to be here. Yeah, it's a long story, but to just keep it short, my emergence into being a creative person was through music at first. So I started out being a musician in a band, gigging and stuff. And then I wanted to start my own sort of project where I was songwriting and putting myself out there. And finding a title for your band is so hard. People don't think, people might not know how hard it actually is, but I just came down to this word that my uncle used to call me back in the day, which was always just being a knucklehead. So it started out just being as a name for me as a punk band that I started. And that was about 10 years ago now. So it has since just transpired into being my handle or my identity as I'm just being a knucklehead. And nowadays it just kind of means that I'm learning and I'm trying to share the things that I'm learning. So that's long story short why there's a big knucklehead sign behind me. It's for when I get on stage so people know the name of our band.
And so you're still are you you're I remember when I first heard you, I first met you, you were talking about how you felt like it was kind of your role to field negativity a little
Mm,
bit.
mm.
You remember that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So I just was curious about your mission, because Roger's starting a coaching business, right? You're one of your goals is to help younger artists and addict or younger artists, right?
Yeah, that's been for the past maybe 4 months. That's been what I've put my momentum and effort into is growing an audience that is geared towards expanding self-awareness and empowerment with creative people. And I
Nice.
do want to get to coaching and things like that, but I'm still in the stages of creating content, growing an audience, connecting, and getting on shows like this and talking to people. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But yeah, that is totally my goal for sure.
Nice. And what have you kind of struggled with as far as like more of the darker aspects of yourself, like when you were younger? I just wanted to hear a little bit about your story, like being an artist or being, I know you were talking about like your kind of group or the punk rock kids, and it's been kind
Yeah.
of difficult because they're so stuck in that kind of angsty negative space. So
Hmm.
what has your history been like with that personally,
Yeah.
and kind of what do you do to work through that?
Yeah. So I think, and this is part of the reason why I kept the Knucklehead name too. because I feel like so often people from the punk rock community and just members of like our youth are so often like talked down to in a way. And I kind of, my approach is more that of equality, in that I want to look at people eye to eye, as opposed to like feeling like, you know, I know more than they do, or because that's I the punk community is so, when you start getting preachy, everybody starts pulling back, and it's just like people are either going to be with you or they're going to be against you, or they're going to think you're fake, or you're just saying stuff because other people say stuff, like you're a bandwagon person. So for me, dealing with negativity in that community is it's kind of a daily practice, honestly. I don't think there's a blanket way to go about it. I was for a long time working in a school as a teacher with like elementary school kids, and I remember something that I knew was different about me than other teachers or members in the school that I was working at. Was every time I had an interaction with a kid, regardless of the interaction, I would think about it afterwards as if, could I have done that better, regardless of what it was. And again, I think there's so many people in positions of power or authoritative figures that just kind of command respect in this way. So the way I go about it is I try to give guidance by seeking guidance. I try to teach to learn, or I try to learn to teach. I try to seek understanding other people in order for them to understand me. So it's sort of this idea of generating respect based off of the interaction, rather than generating respect or something based off of what I'm saying or doing, if that makes sense. It's sort of like always being in a growing mindset, a teaching, understanding, learning mindset, because that's where I feel like I just did a breathwork ceremony a couple days ago, and I was really thinking about, am I doing the right thing? What should I be doing? And one of the clearest visions that I was having during that ceremony is that every job and every relationship I've had with friends or whoever, I've always kind of been in a position of guidance. And that's what I want for my life. And that's what I feel like is natural for my life, I guess, being a Leo or whatever, is just trying to be a figure of guidance. So my short answer to long story short, I think with negativity, it's just a consistent process. And it's not going to hit everybody, but I'm always trying to develop it and get better at it, basically.
Yeah, and I think I think what you're talking about is like a shift in the paradigm overall as far as healing is concerned, which resonates very much with me, and that is helping guide people through authenticity and vulnerability and being human, as opposed to being like just for example, like I have nothing against therapists. I had some therapists that were really good, but I remember going to therapy as a teenager and always feeling, like you mentioned with the kids, feeling talked down to, not intentionally, but the whole just kind of vibe of it was like someone was looking at me like I was less than and sick and messed up, and was I ready yet, or could they help me like get better to integrate into society correctly? And I was always just sitting there going like, well, what about you? Like, what about your shit? Like, what have you been through? Like, because you can't, Like I feel immediately defensive, like shut down, judged, condemned, separate, different, all the reasons I'm here to heal, which I can't, right? In that sort of space. I don't feel safe. And the most important thing to healing is feeling safe. And I think what's happening now is more and more people are just kind of throwing their stuff out there and being like, I'm not perfect and I don't have all the answers. And this is what I'm going through. And that's how you actually reach people, especially kids, because they don't feel preached at, they don't feel talked down to, they feel like they can resonate with you and like, oh, this person gets me, like they've been through this stuff too. And so one, maybe they have an answer for me, but also I know they know what it feels like, and I know there's like an empathy and compassion coming from them on some level, which makes it feel possible for me. Because even, like when just that kind of like, I'm a doctor and I studied humans in a book, it puts people in like this tier where they feel less than. and
Mhm.
and and also everybody knows, like everyone intuitively knows that if you're human, like you got shit, you have issues, like they know you're not perfect. So
Mhm.
what's the point in like pretending or trying to hide or put up this veneer like I have it all together, right? So that's what I think is really cool. That was one of the things that really drew me to you, is like you're trying to help like the younger generation by just being yourself and being where you are, and like
Mhm.
about not being like the guru on the hill that's talking down to everybody, but being the
Yeah.
person to help them walk up the mountain. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I the way I'm thinking about it now is I'm listening to these gurus or whoever, I tune into people that have shows and speak with higher consciousness and more, enlightened people, and I try to think about if there's a way I can translate it into things that are more like understandable to youth and common people, and especially creative people, because that's like the target niche that I go towards. And yeah, it's when you're talking about therapists and young people, it always makes me think of like Robin Williams and Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting,
yeah,
where as soon as Matt Damon walked into the office, like Robin Williams knew that all of what they've prepared him as a therapist or a counselor is just out the window with this kid. You know, he's just going to have to sit there and open up, and yeah, it's one of those things where I know when I was a teenager and I was going to counselors and all that they're taught, it's like when I start opening up to them, it was almost as if it when it applied to their teaching, they would think, "Oh, I know what this is already." So it's like me and what I'm going through without like knowing me. So there
yeah,
begins to be like this shift where it's like, "Oh, you know me, but I don't really have the trust with you yet because I haven't told you the things that you claim to already know." Um, so yeah, that's been and just coming from like where I came from as a teenager, like I was very much I was I attended my parents' wedding. So, like, I was
mhm.
very much alive before my parents were fully formed in a relationship, which I
Interesting.
think is the case with a lot of 90s kids, I don't know, or 80s babies or millennials, whoever. So it was one of those things that when I was a teenager and I saw how much my parents were not getting along and how
Yeah,
much they had not built their relationship on anything besides who's taking care of Roger. And I was being passed around to grandparents, babysitters, my parents were in their early 20s, going to college, working, and in my teenage years, looking at how they would just fight every day, it manifested this belief that I was a mistake. And to this day, it still pops up like when I like my dark times, and I think we have those sometimes where we regress to like the deep points. And I actually
Sure.
kind of went through something like that this week. But that was what started my life as an addict. And that's what really caused my self-destruction. And it
Yeah.
caused me to be aware of how fragile my ego was as a teenager, and my sense of self-worth. And these were all things that, I'm 31 years old now. I know some people probably can't tell. But these were things that I had to like systematically kind of break down in my path to being an artist and a creative person, because the program that I went through when I went to the psych ward and, had to go to outpatient therapy and drug testing and all that stuff, when stuff hits the fan, the suicide attempts don't work, and you're a teenager and they try to put you in programs to keep you alive. A lot of it was just not having idle hands, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of sober programs are designed around staying busy and finding hobbies and finding outlets for that darkness, that negativity. And that was my I went from like drinking and smoking and stuff every day to like pounding Mountain Dew and playing online chess.
Yeah.
Like that was my
You repurpose it. Yeah.
that was my knee-jerk addiction left turn. And then it turned into playing bass and being a musician, and then podcasting and all the other stuff, cool stuff that I do now. So that's kind of where, when we're talking about, New Earth and stuff like that, which I'm not all that, I don't pretend to know too much about that, but I think it goes into what you were talking about with authenticity and being aware of what's going on and being aware of yourself and being able to like share and be vulnerable to these parts of yourself. I think that's a huge shift when we go from addicts to artists.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, because the best creativity always comes out of, well, I think like artists and addicts both, I mean everybody, but artists and addicts tend to have like this incredible sensitivity, and it's the
Yes.
with the sensitivity that makes the pain so much they have to treat it. And so the way out of that is, of course, to begin to embrace the pain and begin to heal it, and to be open and vulnerable, and then to use that sensitivity in something more, productive and creative, whether it be art. It happens in stages, right? Like at first you kind of repurpose the addiction and maybe you drink way too much Mountain Dew, and that's great compared to like Jack Daniels. And then at some point you're from that layer, and then you're like, well, maybe I don't need sugar anymore. But it's like this, it's just, it all happens as a process in steps, but it comes down to just owning like where you are in the moment at the time authentically, and being okay with that. Like it's really, to me, the healing process and the creative process is really about accepting all parts of ourselves as we are in the moment, include the darkness, the pain, all of it. Because I think, especially with going back to like that therapist example, one of the things that does is it causes us to sort of suppress some of the darkness and the anger and frustration, because there's a judgment on it. It's like, oh, we're bad, or we're wrong, or we're gross, or society's going to judge us, so let me like hide this away and try to pretend like I'm in a good space, which is why the addiction and all of that to begin with. And the more we just let go and find all those parts of ourselves lovable, with the sensitivity and the vulnerability, that's where the healing really starts. And I have found, creativity to be such an important aspect to healing, because it's like a alchemy process. It's a transmutation process where you're like, I have all this frustration and angst. What do I do with it? I can either be unconscious of it and act it out by being an addict, or stealing or, you know, getting in fights, or I can put it over here. And I mean, I think like punk rock is, that's a way, it's a way to do that, right? But I think there's also a lot of consciousness yet in a lot of that, and as you become a little more aware, you can do it more consciously, and then more healing comes from it. But yeah, I totally just like,
and that guidance too, like I don't even think a lot of us realize how much we've covered up and suppressed and repressed in our childhood and growing up stages.
yeah.
And how much of a mask we've had to put on. And nowadays we're seeing with social media and stuff, it's just going to a whole nother level of putting on this mask and putting out this version of us to make everybody think that, again, that to escape that judgment, right? And narcissism is now at an all-time high. It's like everybody's talking about it, and people just, and this dopamine, getting attention, all that stuff. It's something that is such a big part of our society now, and that's a big part of the platform that I've been creating, is to try to be aware of these things and aware of the unconsciousness involved in seeking validations and trying to, because for me, I realized underneath it all, even sometimes when I'm putting out content now, if I start feeling like I'm not speaking to enough people, my audience isn't growing fast enough, like I'm not making a difference, I'm not doing enough, a lot of that actually is coming from me actually doing a little too much. And I know that if other people start thinking things like that, it's usually the opposite of what your ego is telling you. Your ego is telling you. But now, from what I've been doing, I've realized the root of seeking that validation was seeking for people on the outside to reassure me that I'm not a mistake.
Right.
Which again is coming from that childhood thing. And I'm kind of 10 months around removed from my last big relationship. And I realized that I was like a super codependent, you know, hands-on boyfriend partner, where I was trying to, the way I described, like, the way my last relationship ended, it felt like my partner was going around the house lighting fires, and I was going around the house putting them out and cleaning them up. So, in doing that, I thought, man, why is this person doing this to me? But when I really think deeper, and when we really think deeper, if we get into these kinds of relationships as artists, as addicts, there might be something there where we are still trying to prove, we're addicted to proving our worth. We're addicted to proving we're not a mistake. And I think that also goes back to the judgment from the therapist, because we start thinking, oh my God, we're so much worse off than we want to be. We want the therapist to think we're doing well or something like that. I don't know.
It plays into, like, our relationship with our parents from early childhood plays into absolutely everything. And it's like, it comes from everywhere. It comes from society, it comes from social media, it comes from our parents. It just gets compounded, one thing after the next. And there is this pressure to look a certain way to get people's validation and approval. But the interesting thing about it is, like, the shadow and the gift are very closely linked.
Yes.
Like, the way, one of the biggest breakthroughs I've had, because we live in a society that's very polarized and it's very either or, which just perpetuates more separation. So, like, even seeing narcissism as an issue, but the narcissism is actually the shadow of self-love. And so when people, like what you're coming to understand, which is you're seeking validation, you're seeking approval because you believed you were a mistake, and you kind of get to the root of where that seeking comes from, you can then kind of bring the light inside to that wound and start to heal it, and also understand that it's not like seeking validation and approval in and of itself isn't like a bad thing either, because when we kind of judge and label that just kind of perpetuate the energy of the separation and the judgment. When we see it as like, oh, I'm actually just trying to find love, like that's all
Yeah.
that the validation and approval is what I'm looking for. But when we have the awareness that that's what we're looking for, immediately we can start to give that to ourselves, and even look at like, okay, I'm looking for approval, and I am, and this might be a little narcissistic, but it's actually okay to be narcissistic, and it's okay to be looking for approval. And as soon as we do that, we start to dissolve even the narcissism and transform it into self-love. But it all comes back to like the understanding of where these things come from internally instead of projecting them externally, which we talk about so much, but it still is a society something the vast majority of us are like kind of in the beginning stages of learning. But understanding, like you said, like that trauma, feeling like you were a mistake, is just being projected outward in how you're looking at, what, how many likes you get, approval, etc.
Right.
Begin to transform that. And just your awareness, like this is one of the reasons I want to do this show, is I just feel like we all have different stories through this stuff. We all have different ways to contribute. We all have different differentiations and variations, but underneath, like kind of the wounding and the issues are basically the same. And when we understand that, that also unifies us much more. And I think that
Yeah.
as people get to tell their stories and get to, kind of share with an empathetic witness what they've been through and what they've learned, that helps other people mirror that back. And goes back to the therapist too. It's like the therapist telling you like all this shit he's been through so that you can mirror that and also get it's like we're just mirrors. And so when we tell
Yeah.
somebody, like your mother is like, hey, be nice to people, be loving to people, but she's like yelling at you and being like condemning, what you're going to learn is not how to go be nice to people. You're going to learn how to tell other people to be nice and loving to people while being condemning, because you just kind of copy paste that
Yeah.
energy. So when you have the new world therapists like going through their own stuff and vulnerability, um, people get the codes of like, I went through this and healed it. And then that's what imprints on them, is like, oh, they have the codes of they went through this and healed it. And now I get the codes of for what I went through and I can heal it. And they just, even by talking about it, they begin to heal it. And so I think that's really like what you're talking about, like just even being that open and vulnerable with your childhood and feeling like a mistake, like, because so many people, it's kind of weird how almost everybody feels like that. It's like a human thing. Like no
Yeah.
matter what kind of childhood you had, and some people certainly have much worse childhoods than others, but it's like kind of a default in the human psyche to feel like just this worthless, not good
Yeah.
enough piece of shit. And
Yeah.
that's like the way we change that is in ourselves first. And
Yeah,
then
and understanding where that comes from and understanding what ego is, because what we're talking about is ego. We're talking
yeah,
about our perception of ourselves, and our perception of ourselves based on external sources of perception from
yeah,
other people who
yeah,
may or may not even be real.
right, right, right.
Like the other day I logged on to my TikTok and I just lost like 40 people like overnight, and I was like, were they all not real? What did I do? But then it's like you're thinking like, oh man, like that could have been like, you know what I mean? Fake
It could have
accounts.
been robots, right? And now you're walking around going, "Oh, I'm not good enough. My stuff didn't reach him."
Right.
Like there
Yeah.
wasn't any there to begin with, and now you're just taking that on in your own mind and creating it. Yeah, and that's actually one of the biggest uses of creativity is understanding that ultimately everything is our perception. It's
Hmm.
like not writing a story as a screenplay, though that's awesome. We're all writing our own like life stories just based moment by moment on our perception. And it's like, how can you,
Yeah.
like you just said, like shift that perception of you were rejected? Because you're just making it up anyway. There's like no real objective truth. Like sometimes there
Hmm.
is somewhat in 3D, but as far as our own internal dialogues, you can tell whatever story you want. So how do you create a story that leads you more to peace, right? Which
Yeah.
is maybe they were just robots, and maybe they weren't like the right people for you, and maybe you just needed to get rid of them to bring in the ones that were, and maybe it doesn't even matter whether they come in or not because you're already worthy, right? And that, yeah, it's just like
Yes.
you could do that
Yeah,
forever.
it's that perception. It's like the perception turns to projection.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
we
right.
think, like what our ego tells us happened, hey, you must have put out a really terrible thing for all these people to leave. It's like, oh, all of a sudden now my ego's telling me, man, I need to, tighten up or something like that. When really it's like, man, maybe someone's server got shut down with all their bots.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh,
So yeah, that's definitely a level of anxiety that is also a very, I think, common thing. Like you said, everybody feels like that in some ways. I think anxiety is almost like breathing these days, how common it is. We're all going through it, we're all feeling it, we're all, it's a part of us all. And even knowing that it's coming from a similar place, especially with creative people, sensitive people, highly empathic, highly sensitive people, which are often addicts. um,
yeah.
it's like I said, I listen to a lot of these guru higher vibe people, and people like Gabor Mate, who's
Yeah.
like, yeah, who really talks about childhood upbringing and perception of pain and trauma, and how that just directly translates into what our destiny becomes as people, because that pain from like is not our fault. It's not our fault, our pains, our traumas, but
Right.
it's our life. So how those traumas and pains manifest themselves in the decisions that we make, in our
Yeah.
personality, our identity, how we think, how we feeling, how we're acting on a daily basis,
Yeah.
that translation is everything. And it turns, it is that thing. It's like it can turn us into an artist, it can turn us into an addict, you know
Yeah.
um it's that yin yang of positivity versus negativity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have.
And go ahead, Todd.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had I just had a
Yeah.
curiosity question. I love Gabor Mate too. I was
Yeah. Yeah.
curious who the Knucklehead listens to besides Gabor Mate, and do you listen to any women?
Yes, I one of my favorite, actually, I probably listen to mostly women. But I love Mel Robbins is a big one in pop culture. I love listening to Sister Shivani, who's a powerful figure overseas, and I love hearing all of these. Um, I think the holistic psychologist is, I think her name is Nicole Lapira or something like that. There's so many people. If you can get your algorithm right, if you can train your algorithm to get into these higher vibed people and these and self-aware stuff, you'll get turned on to so many different people like that. And they all have shows where they feature other people, again, like the stuff we're doing right now. But that's been like my path of dominoes falling, of learning from person after person and getting recommended books, reading about David Hawkins that I have by my bed and stuff like that. But in terms of creativeness, I find people like Rick Rubin really powerful in allowing yourself to be, allowing your creative antenna to be in the air, allowing all ideas to come, allowing and being open with who you are, and things like that. I follow a lot of psychologists, therapists, coaches, a lot of people in my niche or field, and a lot of people that are, and especially Dr. I always say her name wrong, but Dr. Ravani, I believe, who's like the most famous like narcissist psychologist out there. People will definitely know. You'll know her when you see her talking about that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like almost everything that comes out of my mouth is something that I've learned from another person, obviously.
It's all a remix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what you were saying about the I forgot what you just said.
Yeah, I'm pretty long-winded. I'm sorry.
Well, no. But it was along the lines of I think when you were blending it into creativity. That's what it was. Okay, so like I like Rick Rubin a lot. I like to listen to him. I like to listen to other people that have created something, not just a piece of art, but their entire overall bend of their life. Like Master P, I think is really interesting. Or even if you look at Dr. Dre, or even a Jay-Z, or there's so many different people. The ones that some of these athletes that have taken a wider step, and to make a bigger imprint, not just for self, but to serve in the Trinity energy. You mentioned New Earth a while ago. There's a lot of different connotations and names, but to me, the Trinity energy, or the term Trinity, or the concept behind it, really resonates because it's a I guess it's a way of life, or what have you, that I serve myself, you, and the collective equally with everything I do. And so when you kind of blended from the Mateys to the creativity part, it really drove it home for me, because what I find in the 12 years I've been doing this is, whether it's the music, or whether it's the talk show, or whether it's supporting other people now to the extent that we are, I'm seeing the same attributes. And what it is, it's a spontaneity, it's creative, it's intuitive, it's imagination, and it's courage. And it's just fucking like explosive. And I know as a musician, you can appreciate this, because there's something about, you only get one time. We only get one chance to do it the first time, right? So like, you get the nerves, whether you're doing a talk show, or you're going to sing for the first time, or you're going to freestyle with, I've got a brother I make music with every Monday, and he's just like a music savant, right? So it's like, he'll go anywhere. And then to try to tie everything together. But yeah, it's just this it's not really an explanation or an instruction or a lesson. It's, to me, it's transitioned into just this state of being, and then, like you said with Rick Rubin, being open, having your antenna up, and going, oh, we got a chance right now, let's go for this, right? And I don't know, to me, somehow or another, when people talk about New Earth, what is this, all this prophecy that's led to this point with the oral traditions and the sacred books? To me, it's that old saying of it's not the destination, it's the journey. Yeah. Like Joseph Campbell, I love Joseph Campbell, and I say this all the time, people probably get tired of it, but, eternity is here and now, and if you don't get it now, you're never going to get it. Right. So it's like, I say on my show a lot, I can't prove to you, you can't prove to me that we're eternal souls, that we're going to live forever, that we're this infinite energy, but we can prove that we're here right now. and this is it, right? I mean, this is it right here. This all the coding that we could ever ask for is available to us right now. Some of it we're not conscious of within ourselves, but through the collaboration and the co-creation, right? That everyone's got their antennas up. Then things happen, and you've experienced it. This I know you have. Both of you have, I'm sure, with music and or otherwise, where you're inspired by the energy that's represented by conversation or lyrics or music or all of the above, and all of a sudden you spit something out and you sound like fucking Gandhi, or you rap something for the first time. I remember the first time I did a melody. It was like 8 songs into my exploration into making music videos, and I had this reggae tune on, and all of a sudden, and I'm just speaking it, and then all of a sudden, right, it just happened, and there was like these 3 lines of melody. I'm like, holy shit, did I just do that? So it's almost like you open up this internal, in the positive sense, Pandora's box, and the only way to access it and reaccess it is to do what you're talking about, having those creative antennae up, and then as many sacred books say, where 2 or more gather, which is really where the opportunity and the math changes. It's no longer 1 + 1 = 2. Where 2 or more gather, there's this other energy involved, that collective energy, or that third energy, or the Holy Spirit, or you can call it soul energy, you can call it whatever the hell you want to, but there's something else working in tandem with us that I believe comes out through what you're describing and what you both represent. It's a good show, cool show.
Yeah, and what you were saying about I think that's about being open for that stuff to flow through you, because something that Rick Rubin talks about and people like Pharrell and in the music industry talk about, it's that creativity flows through us, not from us. Right. Yeah. Pharrell talks about ideas like going into a library and checking out a book. And sometimes, like, you could pick a book out, look at it, and put it back, and someone else will pick that book up, And that's when sometimes people think, oh, they copied my idea or things like that. But it's like, it's not coming from us. Right. It's coming through us, and that ability to stay open. And you and I were talking about open mics a little bit, and that's why I just love open mics. I think that is such an integral part of the creative process that maybe not too many people know about or understand. But when you go to an open mic, and I've got in my car and and essentially toured doing open mics, like going to Baltimore, driving down, going to different open mics and seeing what the vibe is of the creative people in different towns. And it's just such a really good representation of what's going on with people's creativity. And it's also a chance for you to be open to share where you're at. And that's a powerful part. And I don't know if this is a New Earth thing or not, but this is something that I've noticed in terms of being a shift in the punk rock community, which punk rock started out as being like very nihilistic, very angry, like everything sucks, who cares,
God save the Queen, the fascist regime.
Yeah, there's nothing you can. Yes, exactly. There's nothing you can do about it. And that even led up to, like, I don't know, maybe even the 90s, where you had people like Kurt Cobain stuff telling everybody, just smoke pot, go on welfare, who cares, And I feel like now there's this shift in the punk rock community where it's like, when you give yourself this platform, you better do something with it. You better say something with it. There better be positivity. Like, even when you're speaking about negative, dark things about the government, about what you're going through, you're doing it with a positive intention. You're doing it to educate. You're doing it to enlighten. You're doing it to make people angry so that they do something about it. Everybody is like, all of a sudden you have like punk rock people on stage talking about voting. right? Like this is a big shift within this community, and there's still people that are like, keep politics out of punk. It's like, really? It's always kind of been like this, but the energy behind it has shifted, and that's something that I've noticed, and I've tried to hop on to within that punk rock community, and that's sort of why I'm in the place I am with doing what I do, you know?
Yeah, about finding a solution, just about being more solution oriented, and right, you seeing the inner, because I think the new earth, in regards to what we've all been talking about just now, like it's really about presence. It's about being in the moment, but you can't, like, healing is about bringing yourself into the moment. Healing is about, like, because we've been so separate and segregated among ourselves internally and amongst each other, like, as you push the darkness aside and you don't acknowledge it, you become separate from it, and then eventually you just kind of bounce over to the polarity of the darkness, and you're just angry nihilistic, and you're kind of not accepting it and loving it and integrating it to the rest of yourself. And as you do that, as you see it as okay, as you see it as all part of you, part of you, you bring it into the light, into the moment, and you bring yourself into presence, and then you actually get more creative, because that's how you get, like, the antenna open to bring in new ideas, both from the ethers, from the cosmos, from each other, because we're all interconnected, by being in the now. It's really just about kind of bringing, and when we're all in the now, like in the eternal moment, it's just love. It's just love and consciousness and presence. And so the more we're accepting of everything and everybody else, the more we're going to become more solution oriented, and we're going to be linking the anger to, you know, some positive outcome or direction or transmutation or alchemy. Like, yeah.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah, and I think
Very good point.
what I'll add on to that is what we're allowing in our lives manifest. Another person, and I think I've seen in the chat, like, some people talking about relationships or things like that. And I think this is really when we get to the nitty-gritty of being an addict, is what we allow in our life.
Yeah.
And what we have control over versus what we don't have control over, versus the illusion of control. And somebody that a different kind of coach, his name's Matt Hussey, he's like more of a relationship coach. But what he talks about, and there was one thing he said that hit me so profoundly, and I even relayed it to my therapist, and she was like, wow. But he said, in terms of like relationships, that we're not going to be ready for the right person until we're ready to say no to the wrong people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's something we can apply to so many different things. So many people use the metaphor of, like, you know, we're high spiritual beings if we allow ourselves to be, but yet this ego, this physical 3D world, puts on so much weight to our spirit that just keeps us down into this lower vibration state, you know, where we're feeding into that pain and stuff. But then there's this idea that, well, we allow that stuff to really weigh us down because we don't know how to let it go. And
Right.
That's just one of these things that, if you know, you know, and hopefully a lot. And most people, you think about the biggest changes in our lives is when we hit rock bottom, right? Well,
Yeah.
What is rock bottom? That's when that weight takes us as far down, right, as it'll ever go. And we have no choice but to start letting go of these negative things that are preventing us from, you know, going where we need to go, being our higher self, being positive people. So that's the last thing I just wanted to tack on when you were talking about allowing, because I think a lot of people don't, and just speaking for myself, I still don't realize sometimes how much I'm allowing in my life, especially being
Yeah.
codependent, how much you entertain other people that really don't, care about you or whatever. That having that kind of antenna is a good thing to develop too, with
Absolutely.
self-awareness.
It all comes down to power of choice. And that's a big part of healing trauma, is the ability to say no. Because if you can't say no, you can't say yes. Because you're just saying yes to everything. And you're saying
Yeah.
yes out of trauma, and you're saying yes out of obligation and people pleasing, and because people told you you had to, when you were a kid. And when you can actually put yourself first and be like, this isn't right for me, and have the strength and conviction and courage to set a boundary, then you clear away the things that don't belong, and you create space for yourself to actually create and call in the best version of yourself. And that's actually the proper use, or if they're like the best use of anger. Like anger generally is an attempt to, it's like to set a boundary or a time from your past where you couldn't, because as children a lot of times we just couldn't, and it's now
Yeah.
looking for where in the past it needed to say no or couldn't or wants to go back and say no. And when
Yeah.
people are conscious and they don't embrace their anger, um, they can't set boundaries for themselves. And a lot of times with anger, people are afraid that if they allow themselves to feel their anger, they're going to like lose their shit and lose control and go crazy. But the truth is that comes from not embracing your anger. It comes from suppressing it for so long that at some point it's so unconscious it just blows up like a volcano, and
Yep.
you lose your mind. So when you're seeing the anger as something positive, and the positive value and purpose that it has, and embracing it, you create the space for yourself to heal. Because we do live, like, we're going into 5D, but we still live in 3D, and in 3D there's polarity and there's choice, and there's like, what do you like, what do you not like? And we don't want to stay in that I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, because it becomes negative. But it is important to acknowledge, like, I don't like this and it doesn't work for me, so what do? I say no, I get out, I put myself first, and then I'm able to kind of come into harmony with the Trinity of like me and everybody else all equally together. I'm doing what's best for myself from a place of love, and then I give that to me, I give that to the other person, and I give that to everyone in the collective. So and that comes with choice, which is also responsibility. It's like what you were talking about before, the trauma from our past. It wasn't our fault, but it is now, right, our responsibility to go into our reactions and then acknowledge that as kids we didn't do anything, but now we can examine these parts of ourselves, heal them, stop projecting them out and playing this trauma out in 3D all the time with other people, and then we get our own say in our life and how we want to create it and write the stories that we want to write. And I think that
Yeah. Dude, you're on fire. I don't know why you need me here. That's 2 times you went, both of y'all. Yeah, and this whole thing with the addiction thing, which I think is, like with what you just described about the saying no thing. It's like, to me, addiction, because I've struggled, with various addictions. I think we all have. We just don't always call them addictions, but it's like you go to what's comfortable, right? Like it's
Yes.
comfortable. It's comfortable to do some of the things that I've done in my life. It's a comfortable place to be. It's a place I know. It's a high. It's a low. Whatever it is, it's a fleeting. It's lasts for a long period of time, or you can extend it, and it's and to me that's what you're saying too, is that, like what you said about you can't have what you want till you say no to what you don't want.
Yeah.
And so I always say, okay, so we're in this uncomfortable knowing place because we're afraid to go into this unknown place.
Unknown.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, they say you got to get out of your comfort zone. That's kind of how it works, but it's not
Yeah.
even comfortable. It's like, hey, this is uncomfortable. Why the fuck am I still here, man? Why am I still hitting this, or why am I still doing that? But I think people are making a lot of progress.
Oh,
people,
yeah.
people talk about New Earth. It's interesting to hear a 30-year-old referring to New Earth, or having a discussion and it's talking 5D. Well, not even my kids, man. My kids are like 20, 21. I remember 10 years ago when this all started, they'd be like, Dad, well, you're fucking out of your mind, man. And then you have the psych wards and the incarceration and all that stuff. And but now they'll be like, hey, man, I'm a starseed. I'm a light worker. And it's interesting hanging around them because the environment that I'm in here in Houston is a lot like South Street. So it's an eclectic suburb. It's an eclectic suburb right next to downtown. It's very progressive. It's very open, and so you can run into a lot of different types of people, but many of them will be in their 20s and 30s, and there is a segment of them I've noticed through observation and interaction that are talking about the things that we're talking about, or you guys are talking about right now, and things on that level of substance, as opposed to, who am I going to get laid with tonight, or who am I going to lay with tonight, or
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I mean, you can actually hear, and it's interesting. It really is. It makes me go, oh wow, people were talking about Kundalini, talking about, wow, I had this weird thing happen to me the other day, and and what the hell was that? And I heard you're strange, and you might know, or whatever. But yeah, I think, underneath it all, all these people talking about these different things, using these different terms and nomenclature, that there is definitely more and more evidence that people are becoming something that they weren't. That they're really investing in themselves and loving and respecting themselves. And I guess, that's the thing about the Trinity energy, is that you do have to choose yourself first. And when you do that, there's an evolution and a transition of where you are a bit selfish. But you have to be, for purposes of growth, like boundaries. I say a lot, people have to put up boundaries so they can figure out who the hell they are. But then the day comes when the boundaries don't work anymore, because that's not oneness, right? I mean, you know what I mean? So for all the propaganda and all the psyops, I believe people are really, there's more and more people exuding what both of y'all are exuding today. So, big props, man, for stepping
And
out.
collectively, like there's this collective positivity, I think, at least in America, because there's so much out here that can get us down, man. There's so much distraction. America is the land of distracting yourself. I think we have to be number one in the world at that. But in terms of like how much people are progressing, I have to say here in Philadelphia, which is probably the most intense sports town in our country.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're still not over it, all you Houston people. We're coming back. But anyway, I want to share this quick story because Philadelphia is kind of a negative place and a positive place at the same time. It's like very up and down. But in Philadelphia sports, if you don't do well here, people will get on your case. You will be talked about on the radio, on the newspapers, all over the media. And there was something that happened here recently that has never happened here before. And there was somebody here in Philadelphia playing baseball for the Phillies that was struggling. And he was making a lot of money, like over $300 million. He's supposed to be this world-class baseball athlete. He played for Team USA. He came to Philadelphia and he was struggling. And Philadelphia was booing him. They wanted him out of here. They hated him. And I don't know how it started, but somehow on social media or through the radio, somebody said, when Trey Turner comes up to bat, let's just start giving him standing ovations.
That's cool.
And I got chills telling the story, but this man came up to bat struggling, and the entire stadium of Philadelphia was on their feet cheering for this guy. And this is something that would never happen in Philadelphia ever, of any era. You know, when Philly people are mad, they're really mad. This story changed the trajectory of this team, changed the trajectory of this player. He has since been hitting game-winning like stuff here, and he's been in the media. He's gave interviews about it. He said his parents were crying because they were so happy. And sports is some of the most low vibe situations. I think this is probably one of the where you will find the most low vibe, people at. And that collective shift to me is one of the biggest indicators. You could take the story for whatever you want, but when I saw that with the people here of Philadelphia, I said to myself, wow, this new earth stuff that people are talking about, that there's a collective consciousness shift. There's always an enlightenment period after a pandemic or an epidemic or things like that. That to me was such a mind-blowing thing to happen for people that are not really in the interest of self-awareness, enlightenment, all that stuff. I mean, we're talking about beer drinking, blue collar sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
The fact that everybody who would usually boo and scream and throw things at people that they were frustrated with got on their feet, cheered for this man. I'm telling you guys, that is a total changer.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
Yeah, that's a really good story. All the sports fans, because those are generally the last, a lot of the last people that would do something like that. And just even the fact that someone suggested it and then everyone did it. Like, it wasn't just a suggestion. It was like it actually caught on and materialized into something.
Trey Turner, for those that are interested in that story, look up the story of Trey Turner's ovation, and you can see all about that. It's a real deal, I'm telling you.
Well, and that's the power. I think we're probably almost done, but the power just of like collective support, like how much we can actually shift things when we're supportive collectively, as opposed to being negative and as opposed to like projecting our anger out. Like what would happen just globally if everybody was like, instead of like bitching about this and just reporting the fear. I mean, I've always wanted to hear a news like channel that was like just the good news, like just reporting positive breakthroughs that people have every week. And this kid overcame his fear and got up and spoke in the auditorium, and this person got into college and overcame this illness. Like, if we all got behind everyone in that way, like how much would change and how fast? Like, that's the power we have. And that's just on like more of a physical plane of just people getting behind someone and rooting them on. And then it brings their confidence up, their consciousness up, and then they start hitting well. But like even like multidimensionally, like that kind of support for everybody and each other could shift things quickly now. Like, that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it is. It is. Man, all I got to say is this is a hell of a premiere. And Adam, I want to say thanks, and I love your friend here. I love your friend here. I can't wait to get up to Philly and go to an open mic with you. But I hope some of the other people, maybe invite you on. I'd like to have you on my show. That'd be cool, both of you.
Oh yeah,
but
I would love to. I would love to. If anyone else is interested, my social medias are at Knucklehead Punks, PUNX. Again, it's the same handle from me starting a punk band. But yes, at Knucklehead Punks. I would love to do any. I love any opportunity. I'm saying yes to everything right now.
Cool, man. Well, check us out on SolarGNetwork.com. We got a long history, but we left it all on social media. 6,000 video productions.
Oh my God!
Probably about 150 to 200 in since March the 1st. We got 20 shows. We'll have a handheld app soon. We'll have a free to the
Wow.
public continuous reel of all of our excerpts from our programming. There's music. There's just all kinds of stuff. And eventually we'll have a social community, kind of like a combination of YouTube, Facebook, Etsy,
Right.
LinkedIn, and your website all in one. But yeah, man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you both so much, and I look forward, Adam, to what you got up your sleeve next week. And it's a
Thank
pleasure
you,
meeting
Tom.
you. Pleasure meeting
Thank
you,
you.
Roger. You take
Thank you,
care.
Ralph.
All right,
Thank
man.
you guys so much.
No problem.